It's now day 24 of the partial government shutdown, and it's beginning to feel a lot like Groundhog Day. Frankly, it has the last 23 days. The dynamics, they have not changed. Neither side has budged, and both are eager to blame the opposite side. Just see the president's morning tweets for proof. Nancy and Crying Chuck can end the shutdown in 15 minutes at this point. It has become their and the Democrats' fault. President Trump tells reporters those furloughed and unpaid workers agree with it.
We have a very big crisis, a humanitarian crisis on the border. Everybody knows it, they know it. And many of them are saying, we agree with you. Many of them are calling and many of them are breaking. The Republicans are rock solid. We've got to take care of our border. Many of the people, they're all going to get their money. Many of the people that aren't being paid right now are in total agreement with us.
But even after all the tweets, the Democratic press conferences on Capitol Hill, and an extensive White House public relations blitz, a new CNN poll shows that neither the president nor the Democrats have really moved the needle on the need for a border wall. 81% of Republicans say they're in favor of a wall. That is exactly the same number as last month, before the shutdown began. Among independents and Democrats, a very small number have changed their minds. Okay, so how many ways can you say impasse without profanity? Here's an interesting thing. One of the biggest things, and I think we're all kind of connoisseurs of fiscal crises and shutdown crises, we've all been through a lot of them, and there's always kind of the, all right, what's the way out here? And usually you can kind of map out in your head, like eventually this, and this are going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and we're going to get out of this. Listen to what the president said about some of the options that may have been put on the table earlier today.
Well, that was a suggestion that Lindsay made, but I did reject it, yes. I'm not interested. I want to get it solved. I don't want to just delay it. I'm not looking to call a national emergency. This is so simple, you shouldn't have to. Now, I have the absolute legal right to call it, but I'm not looking to do that because this is too simple. This should be the easiest deal that I've ever seen. We're talking about border security. Who can be against it?
Deal not so breezy so far. What he was referring to with Lindsey Graham was Lindsey Graham over the weekend pitched the idea that's actually been pitched by multiple people over the course of the last couple of weeks, which is reopen the government in the near term, put a deadline on it, have the deadline kind of serve as an anvil over people's heads, and then reopen the government. Also rejecting a national emergency, which as of like Thursday of last week, everybody on the Hill was certain that was the direction he was going. Okay, how does this end?
A question on everybody's lips, right? I mean, maybe it's the Senate nerd in me that thinks that this may end if more Senate Republicans feel the heat, pressure Mitch McConnell, hey, like maybe we should have a stopgap, maybe we should budge a little bit. That's not happening right now, though. We have some skepticism, some concern from corners of the GOP conference, but not really enough to push McConnell in that direction. So that's one way we could get out of this that has been sort of closed for now. I mean, we'll see. Short of that, Democrats budging, but it's hard to see that happening right now. I mean, they feel like they have the upper hand.
Yeah, going to that argument about Senate Republicans cracking and pressuring Mitch McConnell, because that's something that Chuck Schumer's talked about for a while. The magic number here in that point would be 67, which would be the number necessary to override a presidential veto in the Senate. I was walking through this with some Republican sources last week, and look, the first tier of Republicans who might crack are pretty easy to figure out. You know, Cory Gardner has a tough re-election challenge. You have the institutionalists who hate shutdowns like Lamar Alexander and Susan Collins, you know, throw in a couple of retiring folks like Pat Roberts and whatnot. That gets you to like mid-50s. What's that next tier? Who's going to crack in that more conservative next tier of Senate Republicans? A lot of them who will be watching for primary challenges in 2020. I don't see how you get there at this point, and that explains the impasse or whatever you want to call it right now.
But this is why we are hearing from White House officials and top Republicans on the Hill that even though the president went out today and said, I'm not doing an emergency declaration right now, that is not off the table. It's very much on the table, and they're saying now it's a last resort. And in the meantime, the White House has been talking about trying to go around Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and bring in a bunch of blue dogs, moderate House Democrats from the House to try to say, hey, what do you think about a DACA deal for Dreamers for some wall money? But you're right. The president just a couple days ago panned that idea and said he wanted to do the national emergency. Now things apparently have flipped, and he is open to a bipartisan something at this moment and doesn't want to do the emergency. How do you negotiate with a president who changes his mind every day? Democrats don't want to do it, and you can't blame them for that. So I don't know how we're going to get out of this.
It's an issue kind of underpinning all of this, right? Is nobody knows where the president necessarily is, and so it's tough to, I think Schumer called him trying to nail Jello to a wall at one point, and that's not that's not exclusive to Democrats. Republicans on the Hill feel the same way too. They're not totally sure which way this is going to go. You brought up an interesting point. There are people on the Republican side who believe that Democrats may be cracking, particularly some of the freshmen who came here to do something, and preferably not this. Is there any sense in your mind that that might be a way out? I haven't seen it, but you're a better reporter than I am.
Oh, yeah, I'll go on. I think it's wishful thinking right now, but I do think from the president's language, and you can see it outside at the Marine One departure this morning, you can hear it in his language that he's saying, well, now the Democrats, he's trying to build this sort of narrative of transition in the hopes that if this goes on long enough, he can remessage this to convince people that the Democrats created the shutdown. And I do think it's important for everyone to remember that the only reason that the border wall and the shutdown are co-linked intractably is because President Trump co-linked them. So I think right now the Democrats see there's no upside in making the first offer here because they don't think they need to make an offer anyhow. But I think that part of what we're waiting for is the president to test the idea of whether he can remessage this. If he can't, if the numbers don't change and the public continues by a large majority to either completely blame him or partly blame him, then he has a bigger problem than he has right now.
Yeah. Just a reminder, there are staff on both sides of the aisle in both chambers that could get them out of this like that. They just need the green light to do it. All right, up next, the harshest of harsh words by a member of Congress against the president. His response, who cares?